Welcome to part 3 of the Ultra Q production order vlog-a-thon thing. Got my notebook here. Actually, I got notes for my Lupin meets Dirty Harry panel, which I'm set to con, which is a week from now. So, episode 15, broadcast episode 5, Peguila ga kita. Peguila is here. Peguila is one of the more iconic monsters, actually mentioned in some theme songs and on merch. Well, I think every monster's appeared in merchandise by this point, and also makes a second appearance in, well, actually the next episode in production order, which is maybe a good reason to not broadcast them in production order. Well, we'll get to that when we get to that. June is the only regular in this episode, although Dr. Ichinotani is mentioned. He goes to an Antarctic base along with the base's new doctor, who is, well, he's looking for a man named Nomura, and the doctor is his fiancée. She brought along some soil to leave on his grave and maybe find out what happened to him. Nomura has mysteriously disappeared. And then the weather, despite it being summer in Antarctica, the weather starts getting to winter conditions. And of course, well, it's Antarctica, so really bad winter. And turns out it's a monster, of course, named Peguila. Peguila has this super cold breath. This was back in the days when they had this theory that if something's cooled down enough, it'll be unaffected by gravity. And that's, yeah, Peguila's breath cools things down enough that they're weightless now. And kind of stupid. Couldn't he have some magnetic power? Couldn't it just be a lot? Well, I don't know. His wings are kind of pathetic. Maybe that, but or maybe, hey, how about it's icy and it's hurricane force. Why not? But anyway, oh yeah, interesting thing there. Use Taicho and Sensho. Taicho is translated as leader. Sensho is translated as captain. Taicho is leader, and well, it's an Ultra series, so shouldn't that be well, that's the thing. There's so many Japanese terms that could be translated as captain, and I should stop arguing semantics. Although I will also point out, they have these vehicles. I don't know what the correct term is. Basically, snow tanks. They call them snowmobiles. I was a little surprised. Oh, it's not a snowmobile. It's a... Maybe that was called a snowmobile back in the 1960s. I don't know. It's easy to tell what's stock footage because it's scratched. And I don't know, some of the models are okay, some of the, especially the indoor sets are fine. In fact, that went on the boat. I can't tell if they're just manipulating the camera very well or if the set is on gimbals. Either way, looks very good. But the model sets and studio sets, you can see where the backdrop is. They maybe do a better job of hiding now. So Peguila's first appearance, June goes to, actually he's thinking of going out in one of the snowmobiles. He decides not to, but Nomura's fiancée, who actually, once he opens the door, too much snow. Although it would have been helped if they would have blown fake snow in instead of just having her pretend like there's a wind. Well, then Peguila appears for the first time, and it's kind of pathetic. It's just a void with fog. His second appearance is much better. In fact, I kind of wonder why they had to put him there to begin with. I guess maybe the network insisted that they show the monsters before the mid-episode commercial break. Is she supposed to be seeing him? If not, should we really be seeing him? Whatever. One of the crew, Ito, disappears early on, but then he comes back, and then he's muttering about a monster, and nobody believes him. It's like, this is episode 15. You'd think they'd be used to monsters by now. You know, in this case, people make up monster stories, and everybody will believe them. It seems a little odd that, it's not like Doctor Who, where, well, why don't they believe in monsters? Well, that was 1975. This is, 18th, I don't know, whatever, you know what I mean, yeah. This is the same planet in a continuing timeline. If it was only episode 5, production-wise, that would make sense, but that's kind of a recurring theme. You sometimes wonder why people don't believe monster stories a little more often. Well, they find, well, Nomura has been frozen to death, but he brought a sled dog with him named Sabu, and Sabu has survived by eating moss. Don't know how he survived the cold, but okay. Peguila avoids Sabu, and they realize, wait a minute, Sabu's been eating this moss. Maybe there's something in the moss, and they find a substance. They call it Pegiman H, and they put it in a weather rocket, and they launch it at Peguila, and Peguila flies off. Basically, looks like it turns into a puff of smoke and flies off. So, that's, well... Episode 16 in production order, 14 in broadcast order, Tokyo Hyogaji, Tokyo Ice Age. And this is the return of Peguila. I believe this is the first episode that's a direct sequel to another one. It might be the only one, I'm not sure. One interesting thing is, by this point, they clearly knew the episodes would not be broadcast in the same order in which they were produced. They mentioned that the previous episode takes place a year ago. This does not feature Professor Ichino Tani, nor is even mentioned, but it does feature our trio once again. It suddenly gets really cold at Tokyo Airport, Haneda Airport, I guess, whatever. And a plane suddenly stops in midair and crashes. And it's interesting, it's a Lufthansa plane. And they actually do a good job. I think they have to show an actual plane landed, and then they make it look like it's crashed somewhat, with some very good matte paintings. And I don't know if footage of emergency services here is made for the episode or stock footage. It certainly looks like it's made for the episode. And generally, the models are better. I mean, there's still one scene where Peguila is just in a void with fog, but for the most part, they managed to not make it obvious that there's a wall at the end of the set. They managed to hide that pretty well with fog, and they show Tokyo frozen. They don't really need to use too many. I guess they use a few sets when they have to have people in the frozen city, but anyway, they also have an annoying reporter, a stupid reporter. I used to think these were the same character, different. I guess they have a lot of stupid reporters at that newspaper. There's also a semi-annoying kid, and I think he's actually supposed to be semi-annoying, so that works. He's come to Tokyo because his father went there 6 months ago and hasn't been heard from since. Meanwhile, Ippei and Jun discover this passed-out drunk guy who they know is a seasonal worker, because he's a seasonal worker's logbook, and yeah, it's pretty obvious he'll turn out to be the kid's father, right? He's asleep in their Cessna. Now, apparently, Peguila is moving north because Antarctica is getting warmer, because Americans and Russians are mining for uranium there, and I think it's Peguila, but no, actually, it's not Peguila, because it's just due to the heat in Antarctica, some glaciers are moving more north, so it's getting colder up here. No, actually, it is Peguila. Yoriko, go talk to someone who has polar exploration experience. And of course, Jun does from 1 year ago. 9 episodes ago, if you go. Anyway. Well, they need Pegamine H. Unfortunately, that's not approved for use by the Scientific Council yet. And I think it would have been more interesting if they couldn't get any, because it's a lot harder to find thanks to the increasing temperatures in Antarctica, but and go with that. It's just not approved. Eventually, kid's father wakes up, and it turns out that the work he does during the off-season in Tokyo is rob jewelry stores, and he wanted to steal the Cessna, but he got drunk and passed out, and Jun and the kid and Desk are on their way because the radio isn't working. They need to tell Jun and Ippei to fly to the research facility in the Japan Alps to get the Pegamine H, but they get trapped by the cold, and the kid manages to get out of the car, and and while his father is holding Ippei and Jun at gunpoint, I'm going to steal your plane, and I don't care what happens to Tokyo. The kid gets there. Oh my gosh, it's my son! Quick, you guys watch him. I'm going to take your plane and pick up the Pegamine H. I got to do it. I'm a former Zero pilot. That is mentioned before. He drinks too much, so it's kind of implied that having lost his purpose in life, he turned to the bottle. It's not directly stated. It's a little bit of subtlety there. So basically, he flies to the research facility, gets a Pegamine H. It's in a bucket already conveniently mixed with explosives, and, well, eventually flies kamikaze. And so the kid goes back home with his father's ashes. All in all, I think a better use of Peguila than the previous episode. I guess it helps that they're more experienced with doing city sets, and they didn't have to do exterior sets. I'm curious if there are any other sequel episodes. It's been so long since I saw the series the first time that I really don't remember. Was this Giant Snail a sequel to the Giant Slug? Did the Giant Snail already appear? I don't remember. Oh well. So that's 16 episodes down, 12 to go. Before I forget, episode 15 had opening and ending narration, and episode 16 had opening narration, and, well, if I haven't already said this, take it as read that if I don't say unbalanced, they didn't say unbalanced. Now, while we're at it, this episode 17, Balloonga. It's interesting, it's just Balloonga, not Balloonga. Has opening and ending narration, and you know the implication. So a spaceship rocket, whatever, that was sent to Saturn is returning, and actually kind of entering. The pilot seems surprised. I better start doing so. What? I was like, what the heck? And as he's trying to land, firing the retro rockets, he's suddenly out of fuel, and the rocket crashes. So it's about a week later, and June and Yuriko are flying over the area where the rocket had crashed, and there's an old man there holding a balloon for some reason. Will be explained. But suddenly the Cessna runs out of fuel, and he manages to land it safely back at the landing field, the airfield, whatever. And Ippei checks because he filled the tank up, and he finds this, I believe Yuriko calls it a balloon insect. It's an organism thing. Not their word. Mine. Well, okay, actually, not quite mine either. It's kind of a lumpy brain. It's floating, and so they take it, they put it in a box and drive to the city. Maybe they're going to tell Professor Ichinotani, or maybe they're just going to take it to the newspaper. Professor Ichinotani is not mentioned. Well, then it gets bigger, and the car suddenly runs out of fuel, and it grows bigger, and then the car starts floating, and then the parts of the car start falling off, and one of them hits Ippei, and he's injured and hospitalized. He actually has to have surgery. We had one operation, and the next one must be done in stages. I wish the injury would have looked more severe. Just kind of something falls on his back. I can see that it would need hospitalization and surgery, but this seems to be a lot of surgery for what doesn't seem such a severe injury, but we'll get to that in a moment. Let's check my notes, huh? Oh yeah, remember how the Cessna was literally kamikazed in the previous episode, the previous production episode? I mean, it is true that by this point, I'm sure this was a second cour. I'm sure that by that point, they pretty much settled on broadcast order. They probably shot the 2 Peguila episodes. They probably determined the production order based on resources, and hey, they got the Peguila suits, so we want to do 2 Peguila episodes, shoot them back to back, just like later on, they will be doing 2 Garamon episodes back to back, but that's later. In fact, that's right at the end. I checked the previous episode, and it is the same letters, JA3137. I'm gonna have to pay attention next time I see an episode that was broadcast after this one and see if the Cessna is still in there and if it's the same number. I don't know, can you assign an old number to a newer plane? I have no idea how that works. Well, anyhow, Balloonga gets bigger and they shoot at it, but it just absorbs the energy and it eventually starts to absorb energy from the entire city of Tokyo, which is one of the world's major metropoli. Metropoli? Well, Ippei is in the hospital, and Jun discovers that a scientist, a Dr. Naramaru, actually discovered a Balloonga. That's what they named it. So it's pretty neat, too. It's and sort of it's not just a balloon, it's kind of a floating gas bag with kind of warts on it and little, not quite tentacles, cilia, something like that. It's a very nice design, different from the man in suit, definitely. But Dr. Nanamaru discovered a Balloonga 20 years ago, but when asked for proof, he said he destroyed it. So he was laughed out of the scientific community, and Yuriko tries to find him. And then we see him. It's the same old man who had the balloon. A little bit later in Tokyo, seeing Balloonga and been attacked by the Air Self-Defense Force and nothing working, this old man is there. No, that's not gonna do it. Anything, it'll make him stronger. It's like they're feeding him. And Yuriko, who's this guy? Oh, he's gone. And yeah, she does eventually figure out, I think that was probably Dr. Naramaru, and of course it was. In order to keep from feeding Balloonga, they cut off all energy and forbid anyone from using any kind of energy in Tokyo, and they evacuate as much as they can. Unfortunately, there are some hospital patients who cannot be moved, including Ippei. And so they're hoping Balloonga will go away, and a typhoon is approaching. And they do meet Dr. Naramaru, our 2 heroes who aren't hospitalized meet him. The typhoon, great effects. I wouldn't be surprised if it was from a previous Tsuburaya production, a Toho film or whatever. Looks great. I don't know if they weathered the typhoon or if Balloonga absorbs the energy from the typhoon, but then Dr. Naramaru says that it's a force of nature, perhaps the enemy of civilization, and he talks about how nice it is that the city is so quiet. It's never been so quiet. Well, then, after the typhoon, Dr. Naramaru says that the artificial sun that the United Nations satellite has launched will draw Balloonga away from the planet. Yeah, that's the first I heard of it, too. That's kind of a Deus Ex Machina. It's a good episode, but maybe some kind of hint that the UN was working on something, guys. So, weirdly enough, that's a minor complaint. Well, eventually, then it'll realize that it's actually supposed to eat suns. I guess it doesn't eat the entire sun, and then there's nothing there. I guess it just feeds off the sun's energy, because suns generate a lot of energy. I don't know. But there is some narration. When you look at the sun tomorrow, will it be the sun, or will it be Balloonga? Production episode 18, broadcast episode 21, Uchu Shire Emunananayon, Space Directive M774. It starts off, our trio are on a cruise ship, and Yoriko goes out for a walk at night there, and she picks up a doll that somebody left lying there apparently, and then she sees a UFO, and then the doll talks, says, "My name is Zemi, I'm an alien from the planet Rupert's, and Boss Stang will attack the Earth. You must be ready." She screams, throws the doll. Hey guys, this crazy stuff happened, and even though I'm a reporter and keeping that doll might be proof, and it's also a scoop, I just threw it away and screamed, and, we don't believe you, even though we see giant monsters every week. Part of me thinks if those had just been some other characters that happened to, that would be fine. Part of me thinks, well, no, because a little bit later, Jun and Ippei are flying in the Cessna, and suddenly they can't control it, and then the Cessna lands at the airfield and it's empty. And there, Jun and Ippei find themselves in a valley, and there's a house. Inside the house, there's a jukebox, and I love these old mechanical jukeboxes, the way they worked. The turntable would slide to where the record was, and then an arm would come out and put the record on. And there, once again, the record, which is an interactive record, it seems, says, again, "My name is Zemi, Earth will be attracted by Boss Stang, you've got to be prepared." And they seem to think the whole thing is ridiculous, including the alien stuff. I mean, come on, this seems to be extraterrestrial technology here. I can understand maybe not believing all of the story. Well, why are you just warning us? Why aren't you giving us some proof about Boss Stang? Where it says that they have to see Ichijo Kiyomi at the Central Library, and the Cessna has the same registration number as before, and this is broadcast episode 21, so this is definitely after episode 11, where the Cessna was kamikazed, so I don't know if it's a flub or if you can transfer the number. Not really worth worrying about. Definitely isn't because of broadcasting things out of production order. Anyway, they go there and they see Kiyomi. She claims to be Zemi, and again, the same thing. It's interesting, a lot of whip hands here, and also we see them through the shelves. Maybe Jisoji Akio didn't direct this episode. So anyhow, they tell, I guess it's the Coast Guard or something, and they go off looking where Boss Stang is supposed to be. Incidentally, Boss Stang, nice effect there. This kind of egg-shaped meteor, and it's underwater, and it's glowing, and it's bubbling, and Boss Stang looks like a stingray, which, again, we have a monster that's definitely not just a person in a suit. Probably not a person in a suit at all. You see Boss Stang, and it's kind of interesting. Boss Stang sounds, not quite like a desert rain frog, but it's refreshing that it doesn't sound like Godzilla or really any kind of mammal or growling animal. It sounds, Also has sort of a smiley face on the bottom there, but, it's got the nostrils and I think stingrays actually look like that, and Zemi or Kiyomi, whatever, warns them that she's not absolutely sure. She thinks it's drawn to the noise of the engine, and so they cut the engine and it doesn't attack them, and, she says their weapons aren't powerful enough. But then a cruise ship comes there, and they quickly warn the cruise ship by a telegraph. Well, it was 1966, maybe that was more common than ship-to-ship radio. And so the cruise ship stops, but then Boss Stang decides to attack the cruise ship anyway. Actually, it's kind of tense for a while there. Gotta give compliments where they're due. So it's okay, we'll start the engine and go full speed ahead. Well, then Boss Stang goes after them, but fortunately the Air Force arrives in time and blasts the hell out of Boss Stang, and then that's the end. Boss Stang was sent by another planet to, what was the name of the planet? I forget, was it Planet Krill, I think? I don't know. Not as stupid a name as Planet Rupert, that's for sure. Kiyomi says that she's going to stay on Earth. And she says, actually, there are a lot of aliens who are living on Earth. Oh yeah, I didn't mention Kiyomi. Well, they said, you'll meet Kiyomi. Well, we see a UFO, and we don't see the full person, we just see their legs, and it's clearly a woman wearing a distinctive pair of sandals. And then the UFO takes off again. That's an alien. We all see all these people wearing the same distinctive sandals, and and the person right next to you. So there's no opening narration, and there's no voiceover ending narration, but that could count as ending narration. The episode should have been longer. I think that's the problem sometimes with doing these in a half an hour. It's a little bit why Balloonga was taken care of by a Deus Ex Machina with no warning. There just wasn't time to fit it in. It's kind of interesting, and they say, well, clearly she was right, but why are we all trusting her so easily? She also seems to be Kiyomi Zemi is kind of inept. I guess maybe she warns Yoriko, Jun, and Ippei because she's observed the Earth and noticed, these people seem to save the Earth all the time. I guess they're the people I should contact. Instead of maybe the head of a nation or something. I don't know. Fortunately, once she convinces them, they're able to convince other people. But yeah, that could have been that might have been interesting. Maybe, she doesn't seem to know that much about Boss Dang, so maybe she guesses wrong, and you could probably get a feature film out of that. So we have production episode 19, broadcast episode 26, Muero Enko, Blazing Glory. This episode concerns Dynamite Joe, a prize fighter, and I was a little bit afraid here. Oh no, boxing, please. I've seen more boxing than anyone needs to in their lifetime because I played a spectator in Southpaw. And fortunately, it wasn't too long and wasn't too much pummeling people's faces. Football causes concussions. Why do people like these things? He is an up-and-coming champion. He's been winning every fight lately, and he has this pet, lizard-type thing, more detail to follow, named Peter, and he always asks Peter when he'll win in the next round, and then somehow Peter appears to tell him, there, 3! I'll knock him out in 3 rounds! And then he's about to fight the heavyweight champion, who I guess Roni something. I don't know, I guess he's Italian or Italian-American. I don't know. One of the opponents is black. I think it might be the first black person in an Ultra Series. Then he disappears. And, of course, our trio is at the Seaside Hotel, which might be the same hotel as seen in the Ragon episode of Ultraman, not to be confused with the Ragon episode of Ultra Q, which is still to come. And they have a big show. They have a bunch of dancers who kind of look like they're doing a sexy Luffy cosplay, but they're not wearing sandals, so I guess that doesn't count. Plus, 30 years too early, at least. It's called the Marine Phantom Show, and they are apparently played by the Takebe Ballet Group. Maybe ballet means something different in Japanese, I don't know. For the scenes of Peter just as a regular animal in a tank, I think they use a salamander, but Peter is actually an alligatortus, a reptile that responds to temperature and environmental changes, kind of like a chameleon changes color, except here he grows bigger when it's warmer and grows smaller when it's colder, so usually kept in his cold tank, but occasionally Dynamite Joe takes him out, and he grows to not really giant size, but rather exactly the same size as Nakajima Haruo in a lizard costume. As I said, our trio sees the Marine Phantom Show, and they realize that this clown performing there is the missing boxer, Dynamite Joe, and they go to confront him, and he runs off, actually, and a bunch of stuff happened, but they try to convince him otherwise, but they're not going to force him, they're not going to reveal his secret. Yoriko is an ethical reporter. We find out that he caught Peter when he was fishing and just kept throwing him back, and Peter thought it was fate. Well, he says, I asked Peter, and he just has that look. June says it's auto-hypnosis. He kind of goes into a trance when he looks at Peter and imagines that Peter is communicating with him. Not that Joe believes that. But Peter gets loose. I know that the runner of the Marine Phantom Show wants Peter to perform somehow, and anyway, Peter gets out, and then I guess he's in the swimming pool or something. They're not sure. They think he's probably in the swimming pool, so they start to fish for him. It's like, it's a swimming pool, guys. You can just go in there and grab him. Doesn't seem to be in the swimming pool, but now Joe is really depressed. Did I mention that the reason he disappeared was because Peter allegedly told him that he would lose in his fight against Roni? Joe is depressed, and then there's a storm, and lightning strikes a tree, and of course it catches fire. Peter's nearby, and the heat causes him to grow too. Well, it's larger than a human size. It's like Tetsujin size. It's not like city-destroying kaiju size, just really big. And Joe realizes that Peter needs to go back to the sea, so he leads him back, and Peter's suddenly walking on 2 legs. Because, well, then we see Joe. It's kind of wordless, but Joe takes a poster announcing the fight, and he puts it up, and then he starts jogging towards, and our heroes are in their convertible, and they wish him well. So clearly, he has decided to stop worrying about what Peter allegedly tells him and just go to the fight, whether or not he wins or loses. No ending or opening narration, but there is some mid-episode narration where the narrator explains to us about the alligator tortoise and why it grows and shrinks, and Ichinotani is mentioned. Yuriko mentions the alligator tortoise, and she said that Ichinotani did the research for her. So they do some interesting transitions. Again, bam! I guess it's to show punching, or they're ripping, or also Joe is jogging and suddenly freeze frame, and then a white outline appears around him, and then this black inside the outline. Dynamite Joe is missing! Interesting episode, Kyle. The alligator tortoise stuff. Oh, yeah, sure, those things exist. Of course they do. I suppose that's better than, what, a giant monster? Are you kidding me? There hasn't been a giant monster sighted since last week, so clearly they no longer exist. And yeah, I know I keep going on about that. Okay, before I get to the next episode, something I forgot to mention here, I've noticed that in Germany the name Peter, German language period, is always Peter, and in the English language that same name Peter is always Peter. In Japanese it varies. So here Heidi's friend is Peter, and here Wendy's friend is Pita. So production episode 20, broadcast episode 7, S.O.S Fuji-san, S.O.S Mount Fuji. Yuriko and Ippei are investigating reports by a scientist at the Mount Fuji Research Institute that Mount Fuji is ready to erupt, even though none of the normal alarms have gone off. The temperatures have gone up. However, none of the people living in the surrounding area believe them because it's been relayed through the policeman, who not only is a goofball, but apparently lies, or at least tells all tales. There's also a legend of a local Tarzan-like wild man who one local woman believes is her younger brother, Takeru, who got lost in the woods when he was 4. Takeru is real, and so is the increasing heat, and then this big rock flies out of the lake near Mount Fuji and lands somewhere, and it's actually pretty good. It's a glowing, well, a little part of it's glowing, it's pulsing, it has a great effect, really. And so they decide to blow it up and haul off the little pieces. There's some annoying kids. They're always making loud noises, and I think they're supposed to be annoying. I don't think any of them are even named. Kaboom! Oh, it's just the kids trying to launch a model rocket, but it didn't work, and then, okay, blow it up in 30 seconds, right? Blow it up in 20 seconds, right? Oh, that kid's about to pop a bubble. Pop! Boom! Fortunately, nobody's hurt, but... and then at the end, the kids launch their rocket successfully, like we care. Anyways, the rocks slowly get back together. I think they use some stop motion for some of it. And they turn into the monster who's not actually named on screen. Gorgos. Gorgos is actually, it's not a bad design, but it's, I don't know, less impressive than the glowing, pulsing rock. He wreaks some havoc. He sounds exactly like Godzilla. He breathes fire extinguisher. And then Takeru, who is the king of the forest, takes him on and jumps onto his back, and he's actually borrowed the cop's gun and tries to shoot, it's this glowing thing, is unable to do that, and he crawls underneath, and then, well, eventually he's got the glowing thing, he tosses it, shoots it, bang! Not sure how he learned how to handle a gun in the forest. I mean, other weapons fine, but a gun? Guns have recoil. Never mind. Now, he's ready to be introduced to society. They give him a haircut. Although his hair isn't that long to begin with, and he maybe has a little bit, like a 3-day growth at most. It's amazing how well he was able to groom himself in the forest. I kind of wonder if maybe the newspaper has Ippei and Jun on a retainer, which is how they're always joining Yuriko on her assignments. Oh yeah, the opening credits, Ippei and Yuriko are driving away from Mount Fuji, and see stuff reflecting the hubcaps, and the credits are in the hubcaps. No, that's pretty cool. Yeah, there's, I think, I guess it's supposed to be day for night. I don't know. Whatever. It's a good episode. I made it. It's not that complex. It's a good episode. My description, well, I didn't have very much to complain about, I guess. That's why it sounds like it's a bad episode, maybe. Is that even logical? Oh well. Okay, before I forget, previous episode, opening narration, no ending narration. This episode, which is production number 21 and broadcast number 15, has no narration whatsoever. The title is Kanegon no Ken or Kanegon no Mayu. I'm not quite sure which one. Kanegon's Cocoon. This features Kanegon, one of the most iconic monsters of all. It's the one Ultra Dai Kaiju Lemonade Dai? Really? Kanegon isn't really Dai, but anyway. That means big or giant. Lemonade can I don't have, unfortunately. Was, parodied as Digital Kanegon in Ultraman Zearth 2. Anyway, this starts off in an excavation site where a bunch of adolescent boys are meeting they have a bazaar. They're selling stuff they found, mostly junk, some eggs they stole from a hen house. And this one kid, Kaneo, Kane by the way means money, he sees a coin. You know, he always steps on and gets it. He's a pretty greedy kid. One thing that keeps the kids from being annoying is that they have a major nemesis, Hige-Oyaji, which they translate as Daddy Walrus, because I guess they've watched the so-called Australian dub of the second Astro Boy series. Hige-Oyaji doesn't just chase the kids off for trespassing, which is understandable. He, with malice aforethought, runs over their stuff with his bulldozer and laughs maniacally about it. Kaneo's parents, who are also kind of greedy there, tries to get one of his mother's oranges. And anyway, the parents warn him that if he is too greedy, he'll turn into a Kanegon, which is a monster that eats money. One thing he has bought at the bazaar is this little potato-sized cocoon sort of thing, which sounds like it has money in it, and he has it in his room, and suddenly it's grown to giant size, well, or at least large enough for a kid to climb in size, and it's full of money, and he tries to get in there, and he falls in there, and then there's this psychedelic dream sequence, and when he wakes up, he is a Kanegon. He's about, not giant, he's about the size of a small adult, and the kid is voicing him. Kind of cute, and it's got a counter there. When he eats money, it counts up, but it keeps counting down, and if it counts down to 0, he'll die. His friends help him out, but although the one says, I'll help you out, but it'll cost you. They go to a Shinto priestess who is no help. She says that when Hige-Oyaji, I don't want to call him Daddy Walrus again, is upside down, he will be cured. And okay, well, that's no help. Well, maybe if we train him to do tricks, and that's, they just give up. And then he goes to a bank, and this woman who's carrying a box of money into the bank for some reason. She's a teller moving bank. I don't know. She drops it there. Food. Runs off, and then the kid's parents go by there, and then, money. Kids finally have had enough with Hige-Oyaji. They tie a bunch of junk to the back of his bulldozer. I don't know what that's supposed to do, but then a Kanegon shows up, and there's a bunch of craziness going on. A snake is on his tail, and eventually Hige-Oyaji's bulldozer fall over, and that breaks the curse, and Kanegon takes off shooting rocket fire out of his butt, and then a parachute appears, and he's back to Kaneo, and he's like, Baka! His friends tell him, which is, they're right, he was a Baka. So then he goes home and finds out that his parents have transformed into Kanegons. The trio and Professor Ichinotani do not appear in this episode at all, and they don't have the usual ding-ding-ding. They have a much different, upbeat opening theme, scrolling credits. This is definitely more of an anthology episode. I guess maybe they were smart not to try to fit them in there like they kind of shoehorned them into the Turtle episode. This is an enjoyable episode, all in all. Kanegon, there are times it kind of looks like he's made out of burlap or something. Well, not burlap. Definitely cloth, but it works. It's a nice design with the rotating eyes, and the eyes cry, too. And a little counter. All in all, enjoyable. Oh, there's one part where this kid he's talking, wait, come on, what did she say? Oh, shut up, zip. Yeah, his mouth of the coin person got zips him up. This is a classic episode. This is definitely worthwhile. I have no real complaints. The suit looks as good as it could. It helps that it's more of a comedic episode, so if the suit doesn't look completely realistic, that's not a big deal.